With the release of Part 3 of Paradox last year, I've recently found myself returning and falling back in love with what is potentially the greatest visual novel of all time, Monster Girl Quest Lose and Be... Look, I realize this is going to be a hard sell, but I have clocked in over 300 hours into this franchise. There's 2 3-part games, and my goal with this video is to get even one other person to play this amazing series. Since the goal of this video is to get you to play the game, I will do my best to not spoil the game. You see, despite what the name and art implies, the series is actually closer to a shonen than porn. I mean, not entirely, but let me explain. The actual reason you'll be reading this 100-hour visual novel before moving on to the 100+ hour RPG Maker sequel is not for the crudely drawn tits on a random creature, but rather to watch our protagonist Luca go from lowly nobody to mighty hero. And oh boy, do they sell you on his character growth in so many ways. So starting out with the original trilogy, and let's talk about the gameplay of this visual novel. See, this game has turn-based combat much like an RPG, but it's mostly used as a way to show us getting stronger and to strengthen the narrative of the world. The entire game is on rails and the fights are non-repeatable. Grinding is not only not necessary, it's actually impossible. You just read, go to the next fight, and try not to get... These fights are filled with tons of dialogue between attacks, showing Luca's emotions, exploring our enemy's motivations, and what you might need to select next to not get insta-killed. Oh yeah, if you don't read the dialogue, you will die. As throughout the story and often mid-fight, you'll gain skills that can only be used in certain situations that will require your superior gamer skills to deduce the proper timing to deploy, or a game over screen in a talk with Ilias. These small things come together to make one of my least favorite gameplay loops of standard turn-based RPG into a super engaging experience. The heavy amount of dialogue aid in making the early fights memorable for how funny they are, and then eventually scale up into being pure shonen hype. I actually can't think of a single fight in this game that left me bored, though some fights where the enemy's attacks being based around sex can cause the overall tone to be a little wild, so do be aware of that, though this is fixed in the RPG Maker sequel. Okay, so the combat is good enough to drag you in, but what about the story, the heart and soul of any RPG? The overall plot is that our main character is a nobody from the boonies who gets roped into accompanying a judgmental snake waifu on a tour of the world while he tries to make the world a better place where the monsters and humans can get along. See, many humans are racist against the monsters for religious reasons, or because they believe that all monsters will, you know, them. But as Luca travels, we learn that's not true. Only most will. I'm trying to avoid spoilers because I don't want to ruin a single moment of this for you, but trust me, there's a lot of nuance and actual world building throughout this journey, a roller coaster of twists and turns, and some emotional beats that should leave you holding back manly tears. If you can handle looking at this and can mentally filter this part, there's a shonen here, I swear there is, and that brings me to the sequel game, Monster Girl Quest Paradox. Removing the visual novel elements and turning the series into a pure Final Fantasy-esque RPG. What does that mean for the overall experience? A truly shocking amount of dialogue and side quests that really flesh out the world, characters, and story. This game has so many towns and NPCs, it's actually unreal, and many of them update their dialogue throughout the story, or random party members will chime into random conversations, which is unbelievably impressive when you realize this game has close to 900 recruitable party members. I find myself spending hours just talking to NPCs and seeing what side missions are available. A big change is outside of the picture in front of you, sometimes having tits drawn onto a random animal or plant. The porn side of the sequel also takes a heavy step back from the original trilogy, as most of it has been relegated to this castle after you recruit the random encounters, meaning the story is now pure gas. And if you want to goon, you go here. The fights have a less jarring dichotomy between the action-packed fantasy story and the unfortunate nature of the source material. However, they don't have the same highs during the fights, as we don't get a curated visual novel experience, and instead get generic RPG battles, sometimes that are over in a turn, not the biggest build-up for a final boss. And with the success of the first game, Paradox actually gets a new soundtrack that is filled with bangers that would rival any JRPG you would find on the shelf. Speaking of RPGs, maybe I'm just not good at video games, but I think Paradox's overwhelming with the amount of stuff going on in the combat system. There's a lot of customization available to you from classes, races, equipment, modding equipment, tons of skills, attacks, status ailments, and it's honestly a lot. But like all good games, there's a difficulty setting, so you can choose how many of these mechanics you'll be interfacing with. I opted for the normal difficulty, and it's not exactly easy, but I have no idea what I'm doing and seem to be able to progress after changing some characters around, so the difficulty seems fine. The overall feel of this game is good, as movement is fast and there are abilities to turn off random encounters once you feel you've finished grinding. Adding to that, a menu system that remembers your last move with each character, and some of the trash mobs can be cleared by smashing A. God, I love when a game removes the pain points of a genre. In summary, while I think both trilogies are worth your time, the original does have a shocking dichotomy between scenes and a heavy amount of porn that you'll have to mentally filter and skip to see the gem of a story inside. However, the sequel has reduced the amount of porn you have to interface with by like 90% and instead focused on not just creating one of, if not the best eroge stories, but a legitimate top-tier RPG better than almost any game I've ever played. If the original is too much, please give the sequel a try before giving up.